They're using dark psychology in their emails and you don't even notice it happening. Because it doesn't feel like manipulation, it feels like your idea. And you've probably caught yourself reading, clicking, buying without really realizing why. And this is not random. That's pattern behavior and they're exploiting it. And once you see that, you don't just notice it, you can start using it. Because the tactics are not the problem. You see, amateurs use it to manipulate, and professionals use it to guide. After analyzing and sending thousands of emails, I found the 7 dark psychological tricks that are used again and again and can persuade anyone. Starting with the first principle, the foot in the door. That's when it feels that the emails don't have a starting point, but that you're joining something that is already on the move. So when you start to realize and notice that, you already try to keep up instead of questioning it. It's not because something convinced you, it's because the process was already in motion. So instead of stopping and waiting for you, it just pulls you in. It's like jumping on a moving train instead of staying there and waiting for it to stop. A gym tested in a simple way. They gave new members a card with 10 empty slots, and every visit to the gym earned them a stamp, and most of them never completed the card. But then they changed one thing. Instead of giving 10 empty slots, they gave 12. But they already stamped the first 2. It was the same gym, the same people, and the same effort required, but the completion rates jumped. Nothing about the reward changed. The only difference was that they felt that they were already in motion. So they're not just starting something new, they're continuing something, and that changed the behavior completely. And this effect has a very strong effect on the very first few interactions with you right after the opt-in stage. And most emails break momentum there. They're overwhelming you, overloading you with value and story, and without realizing it, they're just resetting the interaction back to zero. And the emails that work actually do the opposite. They don't slow down and don't give you a space to pause. Think about how movies open up sometimes. They drop you straight into the action. Something very intense is happening. You don't fully realize it yet, but you're locked in trying to figure it out. But then, a few seconds later, you see the 3 days earlier screen. And then suddenly, everything is way more slower, calmer, and just normal. We want to start right from the action, and once the reader is hooked, we can let go slowly of the gas pedal. And that is the first step, and most people break it before it even have a chance to compound. And once that pattern holds, continuing feels easier than stopping, which is where things begin to shift on a much deeper level. And once you have someone moving, the next layer is much more subtle, because it's not about getting them to act, it's about changing how they see things before they act. Most people think persuasion happens when you argue your point better, but the most effective emails do not argue at all. And that is the second principle, the flip. The emails start inside the reader's current belief. They mirrors what already feels true, so nothing gets questions. And that's exactly what makes the flip possible. The moment is important because agreement lowers their guard. They're no longer evaluating what's being said and they're just nodding along with it. And then the flip happens. It's small and controlled, but it changes everything. Then the message moves from agreement into a slight reframe. Usually it's with phrases like, but here's the problem with that, or where most people miss it is, and because the reader is aligned with that frame from the very beginning, it feels like a natural extension rather a contradiction. At that point, you're not being pushed with a new idea. You're being guided into a slightly different version that you've already accepted. And this is why it works. Our brain is not resisting to ideas that feel consistent to what we already believe in. So by the time the conclusion is presented, it does not feel like persuasion. It feels like clarity, like they arrived at that on their own. And that is the flip. You don't fight someone's belief. You enter through them and quietly steer the direction. And once that shift happens, it does not feel like a leap. It feels like the next logical step. And this is how you move from momentum to direction. You're no longer keeping someone just moving, but you're shaping where they're going. And it goes even deeper than that because the next layer does not even require you to say anything. People start agreeing with you without you even asking them to. And that leads us to the third principle, the quiet agreement. And this is where it becomes even more subtle because you're not just following the message, you place yourself in it. And you see it with lines like this: most people never do this. The ones who succeed always think this way. People who stay stuck usually act like this. No one is asking you to agree with any of it, but you do anyway. Because the moment you read something like this, you don't just stay neutral, you automatically decide on which side you want to be. And usually, you place yourself at the side that feels more aware, more capable, or just less wrong. And that decision happens instantly. You don't analyze it, you don't question it, you just place yourself on one side and move on. But that is the moment that matters. Because once you place yourself, you're not reading just information, you're reading information from a position. Everything that comes next gets filtered through that, and that's the quiet agreement. No one asks you to agree, you just assigned it to yourself, and you've probably already done it watching this video, which we'll talk about later. And once you place yourself on one side, you usually don't go back to neutral, which is where the next shift starts to happen. Not what you agree with, but how you start seeing yourself. And that's where the fourth principle, identity, starts to take over. Because at a certain point, it stops to be about what you agree with and it starts to be about how you see yourself. And once you've placed yourself on one side, something deeper is starting to happen. And you felt this before, even outside of marketing. People don't quit smoking because they are trying to quit, but because they stop seeing themselves as a smoker. The moment that identity shifts, continuing doesn't feel natural anymore. It feels wrong. And the same things happen in smaller ways. Someone who sees themselves as disciplined doesn't debate if he wants to follow through. Stopping or skipping is not even an option. It just feels off. Not because of the outcome, but because it doesn't match us of who they believe they are. That's the shift. When someone starts seeing themselves a certain way, their decisions are not optional anymore. They become consistent. They're no longer asking, do I want to do this? Often they ask, without even realizing, what do someone like me does? And once that questioning plays, not acting doesn't feel natural anymore. It feels like breaking something that is already become true. And that's why it's so powerful, because right now you're not trying to convince someone to take action, you're reinforcing a version of them that already exists and already taking that action. And once the new identity settles in, the next action is not a decision anymore, it's just the next action that makes sense. And once that shows up, everything changes because it's the fifth principle, skin in the game. The moment someone starts taking action, the dynamic changes. Up until this point, everything is passive. They watch, they read, sometimes they engage, but without any real consequences. But the moment they do, even something small, it is no longer neutral. They've already invested something, could be time, it could be attention, effort, maybe even money. But once they do and it is enough, stopping feels way harder. And you felt this outside of emails. Once you start something and invest into it, there is a pull to continue. And not because the next step is better, but because stopping feels like crossing everything that you've already put into it. And there is a simple way to see it. Imagine you need to invest 10 millions into a project. Say you already invested 9 millions in, and right before you invest the last million, you realize that the thing has a very high chance of failing. Will you invest the final million? Probably yes. But then imagine you're starting a project that's worth 1 million, and before investing anything, you realize that the chance of it failing is high. Will you invest? Probably not. Same situation, same investment, completely different decision. Because once you already invested in, stopping feels like a loss, so you keep going. And once they're starting to get invested into what you do, you don't have to explicitly tell them what to do next, because the most effective emails doesn't say a lot. They give enough information and let the reader figure out the rest. And that leads us to principle 6, the ellipsis. Think of it like this. You're sitting in front of me and then I give you a piece of information. And then a second after, I give you a second piece of information. Then I just stand up, I go away, and I let you connect them both. For example, imagine I give you this piece. In some big and normal company, one day one of their biggest investors starts to quietly take large sums of money out of the company overnight. And the second thing, the next morning, as soon as the market opens, the company drops. And I didn't have to explain anything. You've already connected the pieces. You already saw that someone inside the company knew something's bad is gonna happen and it just took out the money and ran. That is the mechanism, and it does feel pretty damn good, aren't it? And the moment you reach the conclusion itself, it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel like I made you think like this. It just your idea that you thought about, and that changes how you respond. Because people don't resist their own conclusions, they trust them. So instead of telling someone what to do, the message places two different pieces and let the reader close the gap. And by the time you make the idea clear, it doesn't feel like persuasion, it feels like confirmation. And once someone feel like they figure it out, they don't question it, they just move along with it. And from here, things get even more precise because it's not about leaving things open. But even that does not happen in isolation. None of those tactics work on their own. They work because of the environment they've been set in and how everything is being set up before the decision ever appears. And that is the final principle, the room. The same message in the wrong context get ignored, and in the right one feels obvious. And that context is the room. Before anything is said directly, the room is already set up. What you believe, what you expect, how you see yourself, everything is being shaped step by step before they ask. You see it in real life. Think about how you act when you go to the doctor's waiting room. You sit quietly, you pay attention, and it's a little bit more serious, and you do that without even realizing it. And now compare it to how you act in a loud restaurant. You're probably a bit more relaxed, you're a bit more loud, and your guard is down. You're the same person but acting completely differently. The room sets our behavior. It denies what feels normal before you even think about it. And once that's set, the decision doesn't feel like a decision, it feels like a continuation. And that's the difference between manipulation and guidance, because amateurs force the decision on you and professionals just guides you towards it where it feels natural. And if you go to the beginning of the video, that is exactly what happened. When I said amateurs manipulates and professional guides, I did not told you what to believe in, but you did choose a side. You've placed yourself there, and without even realizing, everything that I've been saying was filtered through that lens, because that's the frame and the room I set at the very beginning. You weren't being convinced, you've been guided, and that's the room rule. And once you see how the room is built and set up, you stop reacting to it and you start building it by yourself. And now you see what is actually happening. It's not just email marketing. This is psychology, and now you can recognize when it's being used on you to manipulate and how it can be used the right way to guide. And that's why some emails feel natural to follow while others just feels like they're trying too hard. It's not the words, it's the structure and the psychology behind them. And once you start understanding that structure, you're realizing something bigger. You're not just learning how to write better emails. You're learning how to influence decisions without resistance, how to guide step by step, and how to make the next decision feel like the obvious step. And if you want to see exactly how it plays in real life and not just the psychology behind it, in the next video I broke down exactly how I turned a list of 50 people into $5,000 using those same principles and broke down the entire strategy. So watch that next, because that's exactly how you use those principles. So click somewhere on the screen and go check it out. See ya there.